Okay, Assalamualaikum and good afternoon, everyone. So for today, we will have our last lecture for this whole semester. Okay, so our last topic, which is regarding the physiology and behavior. Okay, the correlation between the physiology and also the behavior. But before that, let me share my slide first. Okay. So, okay, here is my slide. All right. So, as I mentioned, this is our last topic for this whole semester. Okay, which is the topic of physiology and behavior. Okay, in the terms of neurotransmissions and also hormones, and also we'll study a little bit about the technology that we use in the brain research. Okay. So as for the introductions, okay, the physiological psychology. So the physiology psychology is actually describes or evaluates the mechanism for behavior. Okay, so the behavior is actually is the movement. Okay, any movement of the organisms we call it as a behavior. Okay, so this movement are muscular contractions, which is recognizably different. Okay, but it is performed publicly, which makes it easy to study the behavior between species. Okay, so you will study about the animal behavior in your third year, right? In your third year. I will teach about the animal behavior. Okay, so a species physiology must be compatible to its place in nature to secure the survival. Okay, so what are some of these physiological issues? Okay, we have two here, which is the first one is actually the identity problem. Okay, which is the question that rise between this issue is actually, does the brain is actually affect the behavior, or does the brain is actually can correlate with the organism behavior. All right. So the second issue is actually the continuity problem, which is what is actually the relation between the humans and also the animals, right? So we have two different view, okay, for this problem, which is the first one is the religious in the terms of religious view. Okay, in the religious view, it's saying that the human are the different kind of entities. Okay, while in the scientific views, it is saying that the human are actually a part of the animal continuum. All right, so this is actually the some issue arise from this physiological. All right, so we move to the mind and body problem. Okay, so the important physiological issue. Okay, just now we have two issue, right? So the mind and the body problem deals with three important philosophical views. Okay, which is the first philosophical views is actually the idealism. We also have the materialisms and also the epiphenomenalisms. Okay, so in here the idealism is actually suggests that the mental monisms, okay, or the absence of the physical world, okay, it's only about the mental. Okay, and if, okay, for those who believe, okay, in this idealism, okay, he or she is more likely to behave introvertly. Okay, so it's actually is the vice versa opposite to the materialisms. Okay, so this idea is actually they are thinking of there is no mental, okay, compared to the idealisms, right? So for those who believe in this view, okay, of the philosophical, okay, view, they are behave extrovertly. Okay, and the third view is actually the FIFO nominalisms. Okay, so this view suggests that the mind is a side effect of the brain, and also the mind holds no power. Right. So this is actually the mind and body problem. Okay, the importance of psychological issue. Okay, you are talking about, we actually study about the animal anatomy and physiology. Okay, but the emotion and the behavior, okay, of the organisms is actually a product of the physiology. Is actually the emotion and the behavior is actually a product of the anatomy. Alright, so the behavior and mental activity can be traced back to physiological events. Okay, if you want to study about we want to know more details about the behavior or the mental activity, actually we can trace back to the physiological events of the organisms. And the research has been proved that there are biological correlates of behavior. Okay, and they also prove that there are a link between the psychology and also the physiology. Okay, so biopsychology. Okay, what is the biopsychology? So this biopsychology is actually a study of biological basis, okay, or a physiological correlates of behavior. Okay, and this biopsychology is actually a branch of the neuroscience, and this is actually the studies of the nervous system and also how it impacts the behavior. Okay, so this is actually the biopsychology. Okay, so they have three areas of correlation, okay, of this study, which is the neurotransmitters. We also have hormones, and the third one is actually the brain localization. Okay, so in our previous study, we already learned about the neurotransmitters. We also already learned about the hormones. Okay, so the neurotransmitters is actually the effect of the nervous system, while the hormone is actually the effects of the endocrine system. And the third areas of the correlations of the biopsychology study is actually the brain localization. Okay, and this brain localization is actually, we know that in our previous study also, we know that different areas of the brain, okay, it serve different functions, okay, in our body. Okay, so we move to the neurons. Okay, just a flashback about the neurons. Okay, we also this is the structure of the neuron. Okay, as you already learned in our previous lecture, which is this is the structure of the dendrites. Okay, so this is dendrite. We also have the nucleus here. We also have the cell body, also we call it as the soma, and this is the axon. Okay, that covered by the myelin sheath. Okay, so we have the axon ending. All right, in here. Okay. So this is basically the structure of the neurons. So communication between the neurons. Okay, as you still remember, okay, so actually this is the presynaptic terminal. All right, and we also have the postsynaptic here, and here is actually the synaptic cells. So the structure of the presynaptic, postsynaptic, and also the synaptic cleft, we call it as the synapse. Okay, so the synapse is actually the activity to transfer, okay, to transfer any information from one cell to another cell, okay, from one cell to another organ, okay, and it transfer the neurotransmitter. Okay, so this is the communication between neurons. Okay, so this is the receptor in the postsynaptic. Okay, so what is actually a neurotransmitter? Okay, the neurotransmitter actually we already learned, okay, in our topic, right? So just to refresh back, a neurotransmitter is actually a chemical messenger, okay, that carries and modulates the signal between neurons and other cells in the body. Okay, as you remember the structure of the neurons, right? It actually transfer the information, okay, or carries and modulate the signal between neurons and other cells. Okay, so in terms of neurotransmitter, okay, and the fact is scientists do not yet know exactly how many neurotransmitters exist, but it's actually there are more than 100 chemical messengers have been identified. But we also have 10 to 100 billion neurons in our nervous system. It's really a lot of neurons. Okay, so the neurons send the electrochemical messengers to the brain so that we can respond to the stimuli. So the stimuli is either from the environment, or we call it the external stimuli, or from the internal changes in the body. Okay, so it's actually respond to the stimuli. Okay, and the method by which this message are sent is called the neurotransmissions. Okay, so the neurotransmission is actually the method to send the message, okay, from one cell to the another cells, okay, from the neuron to another cells in the body. So they can affect the behavior as varied as mood. Okay, so the neurotransmitter, okay, the connection, the correlation between the neurotransmitter and also our behavior, our psychology, especially, it can affect the behavior, which is it can affect the mood, can affect the aggression behavior, can affect the appetite. Okay, also can affect the memory and can affect the mental illness. Okay, so this is the important on the neurotransmitter to our body. Okay, so drugs and neurotransmission. Okay, the method of sending the message, right? So drugs can impact. Okay, first release of neurotransmitter into the synaptic gap. Okay, or we call it synaptic cleft, right? By preventing and or encouraging productions, thus it can increase or decrease the synapse. Okay, and also the second impacts of the drugs is actually binding of neurotransmitter to the receptor site. Okay, which is by occupying the receptor site. Okay, so this is the impact of the drugs. Okay, and also it will affect the receiving neuron and also can affect to prevent the communications. Okay, uh, and the third impact of drugs to the method of sending the information, okay, of the neurotransmitter, it can reuptake, which is the drugs can allowing more time to bind with receiving neurons. Okay, so this is the three impacts of the drugs to the neurotransmission. Okay, so the long-term use of the drugs, it can cause the structural change in the brain. Okay, that is why we can take the drugs. Okay, drugs normally we can take it from the medicines, but we have a control intake of the drugs because it can cause the structure change in the brain. Okay, as it adapts to the altered activities to the neurotransmitters. Okay, so the most important effect of this adaptation is increase the tolerance for the drug. Okay, that's why we have a certain level of tolerance to the drug. Okay, so this means that the person needs more of the drug to feel the same effect. Okay, so the different neurotransmitter substance and the effects on behavior. Okay, as we know, we have 10 to 100 billions of neurons. Okay, that we already described around 100 neurotransmitter. So this is some of the examples of the neurotransmitter. Okay, the first one is the common one, which already we already learned about the acetylcholine. Okay, or we call it the ACH. Okay, so the effect of this acetylcholine to the behavior of the organisms is actually to facilitate learning and memory. So it is very important of this neurotransmitter acetylcholine. And the deficiency of this ACH, the ACH will disrupt the learning and memory. Right? So that is why we need the acetylcholine. The second one is the norepinephrine. Okay, the norepinephrine neurotransmitter. If the level of this norepinephrine is too little, it may lead to the depression. But if there is too much of level, okay, it can cause the hyperactivity. Okay, so for this neurotransmitter of the norepinephrine, we need to have a moderate. We need to have the moderate level. Okay, a certain level. Okay, because if we have too little, it may lead to depressions. But if we have too much, it will cause to the hyperactivity. Okay, so the third examples of the neurotransmitter is the dopamine. Okay, so the dopamine neurotransmitter can affect on the behavior, which is if we have oversupply of the dopamine, it may lead to the schizophrenic reaction. Okay, so undersupply causes the Parkinson disease, okay, which is a neurological disorder disrupting coordinated movement. Okay, if the dopamine neurotransmitter we have oversupply in our body, it may lead to the schizophrenic reaction. And the fourth examples of the neurotransmitter is the serotonin. So lack of this serotonin will produce the anemia, and this can prevent dreaming in the waking state. and this serotonin are considered as the worry chemical in the brain. Okay, so this is the effect of the serotonin on the behavior. Okay, so the fifth examples of neurotransmitter is GABA. So GABA is also known as the gamma acid aminobutyric acid. Right. So this neurotransmitter will affect the decrease of the activity of the neuron and also may decrease the level of anxiety. All right. And the last example of neurotransmitter is actually the endorphin. So the endorphin can have the relief pain effect, okay, which is a neuropeptide. All right. So this is the examples of neurotransmitter that affect on behavior. Okay. So we go to the example. Okay, one detailed example is the dopamine. Okay, we know that the dopamine can cause the mental illness. Okay, so this is the mental illness related to neurotransmitter. Okay, for example, dopamine. So the neurotransmitter imbalance is one theory about the cause of mental illness. Okay, so the basic idea is that the neurotransmitter imbalance within the brain are the main causes of mental illness, and that this condition can be improved with medications which corrects this imbalance of the dopamine level of neurotransmitter. Okay, normally, if someone have the mental illness, is actually affected by the imbalance of the dopamine level. All right. Okay, so the research into other mental illness, such as schizophrenia, are also found that too little activity of certain neurotransmitters was corrected to this disorder. Okay, was correlated to this disorder. Okay, so this is the important that we have to have the correct level of dopamine. Okay, to prevent the mental illness or to prevent the illness such as the schizophrenia. So the schizophrenia is actually an extremely complex mental disorder. Okay, so the first signs of this illness is actually the person tend to surface in adolescence or young adulthood. Okay, so the people which have this illness, which is the schizophrenia illness, will suffer from the problem with their thought processes. Okay, so this lead to the hallucinations, and also they also can lead to the delusions, disorder thinking. Okay, because they have difficulty in the thought processes, and also the persons who face these problems of illness, which usually have the unusual speech or behavior. Okay, so the symptoms may affect the ability to interact with others, and often people with the schizophrenia withdraw from the outside world. Okay, so this is a really extremely complex mental illness. Okay, mental disorder, right? So the dopamine hypothesis. The schizophrenia is associated with increased activity at dopamine receptor site. So we have a treatment, okay, using a drug which is anti-psychotic drugs can apply the clinical effect by reducing the increased dopamine activity. Okay, normally the mental illness is actually caused by the increased activity of dopamine. Okay, in the receptor site. This is why we have a treatment which is we use the anti-psychotic drugs to reduce the increase of dopamine activity. Okay, so the hypothesis is based on experimental and accidental drugs combinations and type that either increase dopamine activity and therefore the schizophrenic symptoms, or decrease the dopamine activity and therefore reduce the schizophrenic symptoms. Okay, so for example, it is supported by the fact that the amphetamine and also the cocaine, which trigger the release of dopamine, have been found to exacerbate the psychotic symptom in the schizophrenia. Okay, so we move to the neuroplasticity. Okay, what is actually the neuroplasticity? Okay, so the neuroplasticity actually refers to the concept the specific locations of a function is not necessarily fixed for all individuals. We have a different tolerance with the different individual. Okay, so the more a person perform particular activity, the more neuronal connections are formed in the area of the brain responsible. So this is the neuroplasticity. Alright, so it actually can be referred to the process of making long-term changes in the brain. Okay, so this plasticity also changes occur as a result of learning. Okay, so in behavior, okay, we have it's actually caused by learning. We have learning behavior or innate or instinct behavior. So actually the learning behavior is actually the behavior that we actually faced by the experiment, okay, or we can get the behavior by learn from others. Okay, so that is the learning behavior. While the other types of behavior, we have instinct and also we have or instinct or innate behavior. So the instinct and innate behavior is actually refers to the behavior that inherited from the parents. Okay, so we will study about the behavior entails in our the subject. All right. So during the development, okay, the development in here is actually refer to the period of intense growth and also the change from conception through early childhood. Okay. So during this development, the neurons can change the shape. Okay, the neurons also can change the locations, the functions, and also the pattern of interconnection. Okay, so this is which is it also can change in the brain. Okay, so dendritic branching. Okay, if you still remember our neuron structure, we have a dendrite, right? So the dendritic branching is actually every time we learn something new, the neurons connect to create a new trace in the brain. Okay, so this is what important to have the dendritic branching. Okay, when every time we learn something new, okay, so our neuron will connect to create a new trace in the brain. Okay, okay, so just now you already learned about the effect of neurotransmitter to the behavior, right? So we move to the other subtopic, which is regarding the hormone. Okay, the hormone that affect the behavior. Okay, so we have several examples of the hormone, which is the first one. We have adrenaline. Okay, so adrenaline can cause the flight or fight response. Okay, when you face some situations, so the adrenaline hormone will release to your body, so you will think either you want to fly, you want to get away, or you want to fight. Okay, so there is, we call it as a flight or fight response. Okay, the second examples of hormone is actually cortisol. So the cortisol is actually the arousals, the stress hormone, and also the memory hormone. Right? So the third hormone is actually the melatonin. It correlates with the regulation of sleep. Okay, and the fourth one is the oxytocin. Okay, so it's actually the hormone uh, in the mother and child attachment. Okay, oxytocin, and the last one is actually the testosterone or estrogen, okay, in a man or in a woman. Okay, testosterone and estrogen is actually regarding the development and emotions. Okay, so this is actually the examples of hormone and the effect of to behavior. All right. So the adrenaline. Okay, we go to the first types of hormone. The first example of hormone, which is adrenaline. So adrenaline is also known as the epinephrine. Uh, is also known as epinephrine. Okay, so this is actually a hormone that's secreted by the adrenal gland. Okay, so when we're talking about the adrenal gland, okay, so you must remember the difference between the neurotransmitter. Okay, for example, we have the norepinephrine, we have the ACH, we have the GABA, right? Different between the neurotransmitter and also the hormone. Okay, which is the neurotransmitter is actually released by the presynaptic nerve terminal into the synapse. Okay, from the presynaptics, okay, the neurotransmitter will release through the synaptic cleft to the postsynaptic, while hormone, okay, is actually secreted by the adrenal gland, okay, or is actually secreted in produced, okay, in the endocrine gland and secreted into the blood streams, okay. So that is the difference between neurotransmitter, which is normally a proteins, amino acids, okay, compared to the hormone. Okay, so hormone actually produced in the endocrine glands, okay. So we go back to the example of hormone, which is adrenaline. So adrenaline can help the body to adjust to the sudden stress. Okay, when we have a stress, so this is the function of adrenaline. So adrenaline will secrete, okay, will release our body when we have a sudden stress. Okay, for example, situation when a person becomes angry or frightened, so the adrenal gland will release the adrenaline into the blood, so we can calm down. Okay, so this is the example of adrenaline. Okay, so symptoms, adrenaline increases. Okay, if the adrenaline increases, so the strength and the rate of the heartbeat and raise the blood pressure. Okay, so if the adrenaline level are increased in our body, okay, so the strength and the rate of the heartbeat and raise the blood pressure. And it also can speed up the conversions of glycogen into glucose, okay, which provide the energy to the muscles. Okay, the adrenaline also can speed up the conversion of glycogen into glucose. Okay, it is very important to provide our energy, okay, to the muscles. And the third one is actually these physiological changes are responsible for the fight and flight response. Okay, so the fight or flight response also we will learn in the details in our third subject, okay, which is in the animal behavior. Okay, so this is the examples of people who have the increase in the level of adrenaline. Okay, so the second examples of hormone, we have oxytocin. So this oxytocin hormone plays a role in inducing the contractions and lactations. Okay, and it also released with the touch and hugs. Okay, normally the mother and baby bonds. Okay, it is associated with bonding between the mother and also the child. So recent studies has been found that to be beneficial for reducing, okay, the oxytocin are beneficial for reducing the anxiety and also the stress. This hormone also can produce feelings of well-being, empathy, bonding, and also sexual arousal. Okay, so this is the importance of having the oxytocin hormone. Okay, and oxytocin also may increase one's ability to remember happy, smiling faces. Okay, so this is also the other examples of oxytocin hormone, but there is no study confirm yet that the smiling itself increase one's oxytocin levels. Very besar. Okay, the oxytocin may increase the ability to remember happy smiling face, but the smiling itself cannot be confirmed that can increase the oxytocin level in the body. Okay, so the oxytocin and the bonding, the levels of oxytocin hormone in the pregnant woman's body play a role in how closely she will bond with her newborn. Okay, so the oxytocin hormone is very important to the woman's, okay, to the pregnancy women's, okay, because it can affect the bond with her and also the baby. Okay, so melatonin. So third examples of hormone, we have melatonin. So melatonin is actually naturally produced by the pineal gland, okay, and it can convey the information to various parts of the body. Okay, and this chemical structure, okay, like in this figure, okay, this chemical structure is actually identified in 1958, and it can express the rhythmically throughout the day. All right, so this is the melatonin. Okay, so how the melatonin hormone works? Okay, so this is the melatonin level cycles. Okay, so low levels during daylight. Okay, but they will rise in the level cycle during the night time. So the peak level cycles for the melatonin is actually between 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. Okay, because the level cycle will rise during the night time. Okay, and the levels are continue to cycle in a constant darkness. This is why we have to sleep in during the night time. Okay, because our melatonin levels, we have the peak level cycles during the night time. Okay, and this melatonin hormone also can slowly adjust to environmental changes. Okay, so for example, seasonal affective disorder, or we can call as the SAD. Okay, the seasonal affective disorder. So it also can known as the winter depressions, winter blues, summer depressions, summer blues, or seasonal depressions. Okay, so the seasonal affective disorder is actually known as the seasonal depressions. Okay, so it's actually a mood disorder in which people who have normal mental health throughout most of the year experience the depressive symptom in the winter or summer, spring or autumn, year after year. Okay, so normally in Malaysia, it is very thankful that we don't have to face this disorder, right? Because we don't have this four season. So in the diagnostic and statistical manual of mental disorder, the seasonal affective disorder is not a unique mood disorder, but it is actually a specifier of major depressions. Okay, so it seems to be more common on the northern climax, okay, which is they have a long dark winters. Okay, however, the worst time of year for many is actually for many suicide. Okay, the increased number of the suicide is seems to be in the spring season. Okay, so just now we already learned about the hormones, neurotransmitters, and also hormone that affect to the behavior. Okay, so we move to our third subtopic, which is the use of technology in brain research. Okay, so we have modern technology, of course, year by year. Okay, we improve our technology. Okay, especially in this subtopic is in the brain research. So we have EEG, we have CT, we have MRI, we have fMRI, we have PET. So the EEG actually refers to the electroencephalogram. The CT, okay, the CT scan normally we heard about. The CT is actually the computed tomography. The MRI, okay, this is the common technology nowadays. The MRI is actually the magnetic resonance imaging. They use the magnet. Okay, fMRI is actually the functional magnetic resonance imaging. The PET is actually the positron emissions tomography. Okay, so we'll go one by one of these modern technology in the brain research that affect our behavior. Okay, so the first one is the EEG. So it first introduced by the Hansberger in 1929. Okay, so the electrodes are placed outside of the person head in the specific locations. Okay, they're using some sort of cap or helmet with electrodes on standardized place on the skull, and it can detect the changes in electrical activity. Okay, so this electroencephalogram is actually produce the graphical representations of the activity from each electrode that had been placed in our skull. Okay, it produced the graphical representation. So this is the example of graphical presentations. Okay, that produced by the EEG. Okay, so this graphical representation showing that the excited mood of the the persons. So these graphical presentation are showing that relaxed mood. So this is drowsy mood. Okay, so this is asleep mood. So this is the deep sleep. Okay, so actually the EEG actually present the present this these types of graphical presentation, okay, to express the mood of the individuals. Okay, so of course each technology we have strengths and also we have the weakness. So the strengths of use the EEG actually used for sleep studies, okay, which is it used to study the brain activity changes in specific ways during sleep. Alright, but the weakness of this EEG actually there is no sufficient accurate. Okay, this is not sufficiently accurate because the electrode that had been placed in in the experiment in the experiment is actually placed outside of the skull, not inside. Okay, so the second weakness actually the EEG can detect the uncountable neurons. We know that we have up to 100 billions neuron, right? So the weakness of the EEG, which is they can detect the uncountable neurons. Okay, then hence it will give a vague picture. Okay, the vague picture of the graphical presentation. Okay, and the third weakness is actually there is no sufficient to understand the localization of the brain. Okay, so the second modern technology that used in the brain research is the CT, the computed tomography. So earlier we call as a CAT. The CT is actually the combination of the computer and also the X-ray technology. Okay, so this is actually the TC, the computed tomography. So the X-ray is actually shows the human bones very well. Okay, we know that the X-ray shows the human bones very well, while the computer can let us to see the brain. Okay, so the image will look like a slices of the brain. All right. So the strength and weakness of the CT. So the strength is that we can see the brain from several angles and that compared to the EEG. Okay, the EEG we cannot see the structure of the brain. Okay, so the strength also it is extremely useful to see the structure of the brain, which is can show the changes caused by brain damage. Okay, if we use the CT scan to scan our brain, so we can see which part of our brain had been damaged. Okay, because we can see the any angles, any depth of the brain. So that is the strength of using the CT. So the weakness is actually it can show only structure, not the brain activity like EEG. Okay, so different technology we have different strength and weakness, right? And the weakness also of CT is actually danger of exposure to the X-ray radiation. Okay, because the CT is actually the combinations of the computer and X-ray method, right? So we move to the MRI, the third modern technology used in the brain research. Okay, the magnetic resonance imaging. So when body are exposed to the strong magnetic field, so the proton in the water in our body will change the alignment. Okay, so it uses the magnetic field and also the radio frequency field, which is the hydrogen atom alignment change to be detectable by a scanner. So this signal transform into visual representations. Okay, the changes of the hydrogen atom, okay, can detect by the scanner. Then the scanner will transform it into visual representations. So the image represent the slice of the brain taken from any angle. And this can also, the MRI also can be used to create the 3D imaging, 3D image of the brain. Okay. And the advantage of using the MRI, there is more precise compared to the EEG and CT. And there is no danger of the X-ray radiation compared to the CT scan. Okay. Then we move to the fMRI, which is functional MRI. So when the neurons in particular regions are active, so the blood in the regions are increased, right? So it will map the metabolic changes that indicate the brain activity. So these, okay, the changes, the map of metabolic changes can provide the precise picture of parts of the brain active during a cognitive or effective process. Okay, and it can have a correlated between the human activity with the brain activity. So this is the advantage of the fMRI. Okay, and these fMRI are more precise compared to the PET. Okay, so the PET, the positron emission tomography. Okay, how does this works? Okay, it will inject the radioactive substance into patient. Then it will produce the gamma rays as it is metabolized by the brain. Okay, so the scan of the PET, the scan will monitor the glucose metabolisms in the brain. So part of the brain will metabolize at different rates, okay, depending on the level of the brain itself activity. Okay, and the gamma rays will be detected by a machine, and the signal that detected by the machines will turn it into computer image. Okay, and the image can show a colorful map of activity in the brain. All right, so the strength and the weakness of the PET, it can show the dynamic activity of the brain, but not as precise as fMRI. Okay, and the strength of the PET, it is actually a good as an early diagnostic tool. Okay, for example, the Alzheimer progressions of disease. Okay, it can show the abnormality in the activity levels of the brain. Okay, so this PET is actually good as the early diagnostic tool. Okay, okay, like the CT scan, the PET needs to be used with discretion depending on the patient's health. Right? So that's all for today's lecture. Okay, so we are at the end of our lecture for this semester. Alright. So if you guys have any any questions regarding this topic, this our last topic, you can raise it up in our WhatsApp group. Okay, or can contact me directly. Okay, guys. So I hope you will have a nice weekend. Take care of yourself. Then please do the revisions. Okay, because after this we will have the alternative assessment, also final exam, because this is our last topic for this semester. All right. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum.